How's it going, everybody? It's Sausage. I'm back with another review for you. This time, I got a really awesome chance to go and see the Batman a few days early. It's supposed to come out March 4th, but I got to see it March 1st because I'm just a super fan like that, and I got a huge wiener. So I thought I'd give my opinions on it and you know, kind of compare to some of these other reviews that I'm seeing about it because obviously the big reviewers got their hands on it before anybody else got to. So a lot of people got that early screening. A lot of IGN, all the main places that normally get those kind of views for it. It's seeming like everybody was giving it about a 9 or a 10, almost a perfect movie is what they're telling me pretty much. I get what a lot of people are trying to say. They're trying to say it's the best Batman movie and everything like that. I'm gonna try and I'm not gonna like debunk that or anything, but I'm definitely gonna give my opinion on it, and I'm gonna try and make it as fair as possible for the movie as well. So I made some bullet points before I went into the movie to look out for, and I'll just kind of go off of that as we go. Um, I'm gonna try and put the trailer to the movie in the background, and I'm gonna try my best not to spoil this movie at all. Now, this isn't, in my opinion, the best movie ever made. It's not the best DC movie ever made. It's not, in my opinion, it's not the best Batman movie ever made, and I'm gonna say that by saying, obviously, the Dark Knight trilogy was the greatest thing to ever happen to Batman, but that doesn't mean I don't like a different style of Batman. I love the Christopher Nolan movies, but that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to accept a different version of Batman. And with a different version of Batman comes a different version of his villains as well, and that's what this movie kind of does really well. Is it changes the formula a little bit on what we personally have seen from the cinema Batman. This is definitely a more comic book approach. It's very comic book style. It's very dark. It's a very dark movie, and obviously you're gonna think about Batman. You're gonna think about pure darkness, and I'm not necessarily going to disagree with you on that. But I do think there's also like that goofy side of Batman where he's like a detective and he's like really fucking, he's like, he's got like the Sherlock Holmes thing going on, where he's kind of just like crazy smart about shit that nobody else can really think about and everything like that. So yeah, he's got like some sort of like Inspector Gadget thing going on. It seems like sometimes, where he's always got a gadget to figure out how to get that fingerprint or get that dick pic. It's just something that this movie does a lot of that, and that's a lot of the comic book of Batman. That's more of like the comic book side coming out of Batman. This movie is a straight up detective movie. It's actually what they said it was going to be. It's when it comes to that aspect, like the detective portion of it, if you're into like a straight up detective movie about like grisly murders and stuff like that, this is really good. Like this is top tier for being like a superhero movie. It's a really fun ride. It reminds me a lot the tone of Seven. Like I was saying before, it reminds me very much of Seven in like the grisly kind of way, where it's kind of like dark and druid and it's always raining outside. You can really feel Gotham's just nastiness, like throughout the whole thing. You can just feel the dark, dirty fucking streets of Gotham throughout this whole movie. And they make sure you see that from the beginning, how just like fucked up Gotham actually is and how disgusting it actually is. And, if we wouldn't have Batman if it weren't for Gotham. So, it's very cool that they're giving that a lot of attention in this movie, and the tone of everything just felt so dark and gritty. And personally for me, that's why I was kind of saying I don't want to like act like this isn't the best Batman movie, because I know we've had a great trilogy before this and it's hard to compare to that. But one thing that was really good about the Dark Knight trilogy, and maybe people will disagree with me, I really don't care, the villains in the Dark Knight trilogy was really what made those Batman movies really good. I'm not saying that without like the Heath Ledger Joker, or without the Tom Hardy Bane, or without the Cillian Murphy Scarecrow, or Ra's al Ghul, Liam Neeson. I'm not saying that those movies wouldn't be good without them, but they wouldn't be nearly as perfect as they are if they didn't have them. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Grittiness. It's just really gritty. Even the title screen is really gritty, really I don't know. It's a very like just like detective vibe, and that's really cool for a Batman movie because we don't really get that too often. Normally we get like the super action packed Batman, and that's about it. And this one, it takes it a step back a little bit. It slows down a little bit more, though there is action scenes in this movie. I'll talk about like the fighting and stuff in a little bit. It's mostly a detective movie though. That's what the movie's for. It's to get you thinking, and it does get you thinking a little bit, though it does slow down a bit and kind of unravel itself too much, and it kind of gets a little bit annoying when it comes down to it. It gets a little boring sometimes. But like I said, the tone of a Batman movie is different for everybody. Like I personally, I love this tone. This is my favorite type of like gritty Batman. I like a Batman that's kind of unsure of himself, and he's kind of just like testing out like how good he can be at something and what he can do the right way and what he can do the wrong way. And that's what this movie a lot is. It's a lot of growing pains. So this one takes place pretty much Bruce Wayne, Batman. He's been Batman for about 2 years now. He keeps a journal, and the movie's kind of narrated by him at some points. I wish the whole movie was narrated by him, but it's only like certain segments of the movie. The movie only really takes place within a full week from Halloween to a certain time in November. So it's honestly like I wanted like I wanted more like a Rorschach thing from Watchmen, if you've ever seen that. I wanted like a diary, like almost like a journal from him every time he was like, we switch scenes. Like that would have been really good. It didn't really happen like that too much. In the beginning of the movie, he's kind of writing in a journal and talking to us at the same time. And that's really fun. Like I said, it gives you a strong Watchmen vibe. Like the whole movie kind of has a Watchmen vibe. It's got a very just dark tone, like I said before. So we talked about the setting a little bit on how it's in Gotham City, and it's really dark, and it's druid, and it's kind of a scumbag type of place as always. But I want to talk a little bit more about like the story as a whole. It's like I said, it's Batman in his first couple years, so he's really inexperienced. And you can see that those inexperiences cost him a lot of moments. Though he is an absolute badass in this movie, he's an absolute just goon, dude. He's pushing through people, slamming people, just doing things that you don't normally see Batman do. He's taking weapons and he's actually beating people with them and shit. There's a lot of moments like that, and those are really good moments. The movie doesn't really tell you if this is like Batman's first big case or if this might be like his, just growing pains into another case that he's doing. But like it feels like this is his first major like something's pushing back at him. He's kind of got a hold of Gotham City, it seems like, throughout this movie. Like everybody's scared of him. Even in his opening monologue in the movie, he's pretty much talking about how like they fear the shadows, and it's showing goons like running around doing drug deals, and they're scared to do drug deals because they're scared he's in the shadows. And you almost sometimes feel like he might be in the shadows and he might be everywhere, though he tells you, I can't be everywhere. I can't always be there to save everybody type of shit. He's a really realistic type of guy. You could tell Bruce, like, as Batman, he really is a very like self-conscious guy. He understands like his limits. And that is honestly somewhat his downfall at the same time, because he thinks that he's fearless. He thinks that he has no fear whatsoever in this movie, but in reality, like, fear is what's holding him back. He's afraid to die. He's afraid to go through all these things, that can cause him a lot of pain. But pretty much going to be like your typical Batman origin story, except you're not really going to get the origin of how him and his parents, like how his parents died and everything, though they talk about that a little bit. And I mean, we do get a lot of moments where it gets deep into like the Thomas and Martha Wayne stuff that happens before we got to see what happened. And it gets pretty deep sometimes, and it gets a little crazy sometimes, but I think it's a good addition in a way to the movie with what they did give us. Instead of just giving us your traditional, oh, let me show you how this kid is an orphan and it's so sad, it kind of looks at it from like an external point of view, and I don't feel like you'll understand that until you see the movie. And then you'll kind of see what I'm saying. Pretty much Riddler is leaving behind bodies in a really kind of gruesome fashion, and much causing a mass stir amongst the entire Gotham community. Just kind of changing people's minds and opening people's minds to different perspectives on change in the city and how corrupt the city really is. And I think it's a really, really well thought out plan. And the main goal is to obviously get to the Riddler, and he's leaving little pieces of people behind, pretty much like murder cases behind for Batman to solve. And he always has like these little notes that say to Batman, and it's always a riddle and everything like that. And it's really well put together. It's really fun, especially the first half of the movie. It's really fun for the story. The story does take a little bit of a dive about, I'd say, 2/4 into the third act. That's when the movie starts to kind of get a little goofy. It gets a little bit like ahead of itself. It tries to solve its own cases without like letting, like, it's like throughout the story, it seems like it's trying to unravel a mystery. Obviously, it's a detective movie, but like I personally, as the audience, already had, like, I feel like the audience already had the answer to the main riddle of the movie within like 3/4 of the movie. but like it's almost like Batman and like all the other characters around him didn't want to try to solve this. Like it's like they wanted to be naive about it to make it even harder, and it almost felt like it was padding for the movie a little bit. There were moments where we were getting a little bit bored here and there, but it wasn't too bad. Obviously, you're at a Batman movie, you're going to be paying attention most of the time, but there were moments where I was kind of just drifting off because things just weren't really moving that fast. It was really slow paced, and that's not to say like every scene, like every slow scene is bad in this movie. It's just some of them are really boring and very DC, if that makes sense. Just padding sometimes. I'm going to go into the pacing of this movie. That's going to lead me into pacing, and when it comes to the pacing of this movie, like I said, about 3/4 of the way through the movie, it gets a little bit like goofy. Like things start to kind of like drift away from where it was originally going. It seems like Batman's tone completely changes out of nowhere at times. It seems like just like the clues that he was getting just completely went the opposite direction I was expecting. It wasn't like for good reasons either. Like it just sometimes felt like the movie kind of got off its own high horse for a second and just kind of became a shitty DC movie at times. And that kind of annoyed me, especially when the movie was just getting good about halfway through. About halfway through is when it's in the trailer, you'll probably see. About halfway through is when the big Penguin car chase happens. And yeah, Penguin is in this movie. Colin Farrell is fantastic as Penguin. They said he wasn't going to be in the movie as much, but he's in the movie like crazy. He's pretty good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed every part of it. But once we got to about the part where the chase happened, the big, highway chase happened between Batman and Penguin, that was really, really good. That looked really good. It was really nicely put together. It was just really fun to watch. It was adrenaline pumping. After that scene, it seemed like once we hit the third act, it seems like things started to slow down and it tried to kind of change things, and I didn't need that too much, and that kind of messed up the pacing a lot, and it seems like DC is really good at that nowadays. Again, it's weird that it happens like that, but what are you gonna do about it? It was still a really well-paced movie for at least the majority of it. It's just that last like hour and like 10 minutes kind of got a little goofy, especially towards the end of the movie. This is kind of story and pacing wise, it gets a little bit a little slow, a little boring, a little underwhelming sometimes. And speaking of underwhelming, I'm going to go into characters a little bit more because, like I said, I'm not trying to say too much about this movie because a lot of people are going to be excited to see this. I'm not trying to bag on this movie at all. I'm just giving my honest opinions on it, obviously. I'm going to go into the characters. So, speaking of underwhelming, Adrian and I both agreed right after the movie that Catwoman was very underwhelming in this movie. There were scenes where she could have shined very much, and honestly, even Batman had moments where he could have shined way more. And like I said before in the pacing, it seemed like Batman's pacing was a little weird too. The first half, he was just absolutely ripping people apart, just beating the shit out of people. And then again, pacing wise, it just seemed like it slowed down and like he became like nicer about things. Like it was just a little bit weirder. It's the same thing with Catwoman. She was just very like cool for a minute, and then it was just like she wasn't really there that much. It seemed like she was there, but it was more or less for the love interest of the movie, and that's another part of the pacing that was, it added to it a little bit, was the love scenes and the love between Batman and Catwoman and the dynamic between them. They really exposed that in this movie a lot, and it's really good. It's a good little love story, though it does kind of get in the way of itself sometimes, especially at the end of the movie. It's not too bad to the point. I would have sacrificed a lot of those romantic scenes between the two of them, or those intimate scenes between the two of them, for a little bit more action from Catwoman. That would have been really cool. There's no scene between Catwoman and Batman fighting together. Like, we needed that back-to-back moment where they're fighting side by side and they prove how well they are chemistry-wise. But yeah, she was very underwhelming. Like I said before, I thought Penguin was really cool. I thought Riddler was really cool. Though I did have some issues with him. I felt like he wasn't really there too often. He was always like, and I know how Riddler is. He's kind of a puss. He likes to sit behind his fucking phone and contact Batman and, like just kind of talk shit to him and everything like that. But he's not really like a social guy. He's not going to be like really, in your face and shit like that. But like, we really didn't get any moments in this movie, and I hate to say this and I hate to spoil it, but like there's no moments where Batman and Riddler are actually face to face like fighting, except for the scene where they're in the precinct. That's the only time you see them face to face, and that's a really, really good scene. And I would say right after that scene, that's when the movie's pacing started getting a little goofy. The Riddler was pretty consistent the entire time. He gave me a lot of like Heath Ledger vibes sometimes, though I'm not trying to compare the two. He did give me those vibes quite a bit, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing because greatness has to copy greatness if you want to be great. He took a lot from that, and it was fine. There's a lot of moments where the Riddler is like video calling people and torturing people over the phone type stuff, like through a video call and everything, and it just gave me a lot of Joker vibes. But that's okay. That's not a big deal. It's gritty. It's really dark, and I kind of liked it, to be honest with you. I thought Paul Dano gave his heart to this role. I thought he did a really good job. He gave me, if you've seen Prisoners, which is a movie with the same type of vibe, to be honest with you, the same type of like setting and like feeling of dread sometimes. Paul Dano in that movie, he plays a little bit of the same character, to be honest, as the Riddler in this movie. It's just he's a little bit more childish, obviously. He's got a mental disorder, I believe, in Prisoners, but it kind of feels that way in this movie too a little bit. Like he's disturbed, and you can clearly tell, and he plays that really well, and I think he always has played that really well. So, Gordon was really good. I like the change they made to him. I like just like the way he is. He's a little bit more of like a passive guy. He's really cool with Batman. He doesn't want to have any trouble with him whatsoever. Though the police hate Batman, obviously. A lot of this movie is like a detective / mobster case, because like a lot of this movie Batman's dealing with Penguin, who is obviously Cobblepot's a part of the Falcone criminal mastermind stuff. The takeover of Gotham kind of. So there's a lot of that stuff going on, and I think they resolve a lot of that late in the movie, and it does get resolved, a lot of the gang stuff that happens. Though it might have taken a little too much time to resolve it, unfortunately. They still did an okay job with it. And speaking of Falcone, it was John Turturro, Jesus himself, such a great guy. He was great as Falcone. I liked him a lot. He was very ominous. I thought they could have just done a little bit better with Falcone and the rest of the gangster guys, but I thought Penguin was definitely top tier, and he kept it all together, especially the scenes he got with Batman, and I thought they did a really good job. Colin Farrell is an absolute monster for how well he played that part. I think he set a standard for the Penguin now, and I'm glad to hear that there's supposed to be like a show or something about him possibly coming out. Same with Catwoman, actually. I guess Zoe Kravitz has signed on for a Catwoman show. I'm not going to say when that takes place, because I think I know when that's going to take place in the series, but I don't want to say in this review. Andy Serkis as Alfred, he was good. He was also overwhelming, though. Underwhelming. He wasn't really in the movie as much as I wanted him to be. And this is, and not to spoil it, but you're going to get this if you've watched Gotham at all. It's the same type of Alfred. It's the Secret Service Alfred, the one that trained Batman pretty much. And with that being said, you can tell that Batman's fight moves are a little different. And I'm going to lead into a little more cinematography in a couple minutes here. But one more thing I wanted to say about the characters is obviously the bread and butter of the movie, Robert Pattinson. I liked him. I liked him a lot, actually. I really enjoyed him as Batman. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed him as Bruce Wayne. I enjoyed him as Batman. I thought the tone that they were trying to give us with Bruce Wayne in this movie, because there's always the Bruce Wayne and there's always the Batman. I thought the Bruce Wayne was a little bit shitty. He was kind of like an emo kid majority of the time. But you could tell he's fresh and he's new. And I really wish we would have gotten a little bit of, a little bit more backstory about what Bruce Wayne has been doing before he was Batman. Like, I wanted to see like how he like kind of grew with the city, and it doesn't seem like he grew too well with the city, because it doesn't seem like the city really cares too much about him, and he doesn't really care about it unless he's Batman, it seems like. And that's a lot of the dilemma in this movie as well, is who is Bruce Wayne really. And that's going to become a big factor in this movie, and that's something that I think a lot of people are going to resonate with. It's really fun to kind of question the hero sometimes, and that's what this movie does, especially with how brutal Pattinson is as Batman. He's very very gritty, especially in that first half of the movie. Like I said, the bottom half of the movie, not as much, but that first half, it's really got you on your toes with how aggressive he is. I liked him as Batman, though. I really did. I hope there's more movies with him. I really do. I think he did a lot with what he was given. I think he's not like a big, bulky Ben Affleck, buff Batman. He's not a buff guy, and they give you a lot of hints that he's not a big guy. He's got his shirt off a lot of times when he's walking around his house. He's kind of like a skater punk kind of thing, kind of like a daddy issue kind of guy. But it's kind of cool and it's kind of edgy, to be honest. It's not too bad. It's more gritty and it's more down to earth. For what he is. Even like, it'll zoom in on his boots and stuff. You can tell his boots are like boots that you buy from like a fucking hardware store type of shit, you know, just spray painted black, and his mask is custom made, you know what I mean? He doesn't like, you know, it's not like all cool looking and professional. It's like actually like vigilante style, and I loved how gritty that was. I loved how deep down Robert Pattinson got with it, and I knew Robert Pattinson would be good as Batman in my opinion because I don't think he's a bad actor. I even said in my previous talks about the Batman, I don't think Robert Pattinson's a bad actor. I think he's really good at playing a dark, edgy guy. And I think he owns it, and I think he does it well, and I think this is a great role for him. I'm really proud of how well he did. I'm really, really proud about how Matt Reeves put this movie together. I think this is I think this is an accomplishment for Batman as a whole. Though it's not rated R, it's a hard PG-13. This is a rough movie, man. It's really, there's a lot of gritty shit going on in it. There's a lot of just like gruesome shit going on in it. It doesn't show all of it, unfortunately. For instance, somebody gets eaten by rats at a certain point in the movie, and it's really fucking aggressive, and it doesn't really show it as much as I would want it to, or pictures of it like I want it to. If this is a detective movie, I want to see the gritty shit that the Riddler or whoever is leaving behind. But with that PG-13, they kind of have to hold off on that sometimes. There are some cuss words in this movie. They definitely, like, the F word is said like in the first like 20 minutes of the movie. Though they don't go excessive with it, they definitely made it. I felt like the first half of this movie had an idea to be rated R, and then it felt like halfway through they were like, okay, let's dim it down to a PG-13 kid flick, and they kind of just lowered it a little bit, but it was still gritty towards the end. It was just not as gritty as the first half, and that's my biggest complaint with this movie, I would say, is how much the pacing changed halfway through, and it's just another DC move, and that sucks. But yeah, Pattinson was great. I want to talk about the cinematography a little bit, and just how good it was. It was so beautiful. The movie was really beautiful. Everything always had like a red tint, almost like the sun was setting at all times. It was always an orange and red tint in the background, and that always just felt really like discomforting but comfortable at the same time, if that makes any sense. It's kind of just like the in-between feeling of being comfortable and not being comfortable, where you're just kind of like, I don't know what to feel right now. But like the movie sets it up really well, and some of the shots this movie has are just absolutely gorgeous. I'm going to talk about just like the lighting in general is just, you know, I think about the lighting. I think about just like the explosions. Just the way everything looked was really, really, really pretty. And I really appreciated how like gritty and pretty they put it all together. Some of the camera shots when Batman is walking or coming out of the shadows, or for instance, my favorite shot of the entire movie is in the preview, actually, when he rolls Penguin and fucking comes walking out of the fire. And it's an upside down shot of him walking out of the fire, because you're looking at it from the characters that's in the car. You're looking from his perspective, and he's upside down, so he's looking at Batman, and you can just tell the fear. And I felt the fear when he was walking up to him. Then it kind of cuts away from that scene, and it sucked because I wanted to see Batman do some gritty shit. But that's okay, because some of the shots were just absolutely fantastic anyway. So yeah, the score in this movie was absolutely fantastic. The sound, the Nirvana soundtrack in the background was really, really good. It was just really, like, the tone of it was really, really hardcore. You really felt like you were kind of, I watched it in IMAX, so it felt like it was like really just like pressured on my chest when I would hear the bass, and it was really nice. It was really cool. Best way to describe this movie's soundtrack is it's very grunge. If you're from like the 90s, you'll understand that. I'm gonna throw a rating on it. The rating I'm gonna throw this movie, it's not. I expected going into this movie, I thought it was gonna come out. I was gonna come out saying it's a 9 or a 10, like everybody else was saying. And I'm not saying this to be different. And I'm trying to use all the pinpoints that I gave you guys about this movie to kind of justify why I'm giving it this score. But before I go into the spoiler talk, I'm gonna score it, and I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10. I don't know if that's a fair number or not, to be honest with you. For a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people are expecting me to say this is the best Batman movie ever made. And I'm not going to say it's not, but I'm not going to say it is, because I think it's going to be a very opinionated movie. I think a lot of people are going to look at this and compare it to The Dark Knight. And I think when you do that, you're going to make it not the best Batman movie. But I do think this is the biggest step a Batman movie has taken. And I think change is always a good thing. I think doing something different is always smart. so long as you believe in it. And I felt like they believed in this movie, and I just felt like maybe COVID messed it up a little bit. Maybe the tone changed a little bit. Maybe DC had a little too much time to think about story changes, and maybe they had a little too much time to rewrite stuff. I think if that the half of that third act to the end of the movie, I think if that was a little bit stronger, I think I'd be giving this a 9. I definitely think that there's a few little spoilers that I'm going to say that kind of, I don't know. I want people to not see the spoilers until they see the movie, because I do think you should see this movie. I think it's an awesome Batman movie. I think this is the perfect gritty detective Batman movie. I think if you're looking for like a hardcore, like, you know, badass Batman, this is probably going to be about half of that for you. Like he's badass and he's gritty, but at the same time he's kind of like emotional. So I'm gonna give it 7.5, and I feel like, exactly with what I said, I feel like I can justify that, to be honest with you, because I think a lot of people are gonna notice the tone change in this movie halfway through, or a little more than halfway through. And I want to give it a higher score because this is personally my favorite Batman movie is obviously Dark Knight, but it's definitely a runner-up for me. I like this Batman movie a lot. I like how hard it pushes the PG-13. I like how gritty it was. Like I said, I like the score. I like, I love that Nirvana, like just like dark feeling in the background. They did a really good job with the tone of this movie. I just thought there were a lot of story beats that were a little bit off. A couple moments where I was just kind of like, why, and some of the action just kind of got dimmed down a little bit too much. If anything, I felt like when I was watching it, I was like, it's a 7. I'm going to give it a 7.5 though, because I just thought it was really well put together. And that's, and if you watch my reviews, my scores aren't particularly like deadlocked all the time. Like it's you can watch this movie maybe in a few years, maybe they'll make like 4 more Batman movies and they all suck and this one's the good one, and maybe this one will end up becoming like a 9 or a 10. I think as of right now though, I think when we're looking at Batman movies, I think this is probably the second best Batman movie we've ever got, if we're talking Dark Knight as the first. Now I do think the potential of this Batman is the best we've ever had. I think we can really step it up here. I think in the next movie, I think they can really, really get it to the top. I think this movie's going to do really well in the box office. Obviously, it's Batman. I think the next movie is going to be even better, and I think that's saying a lot, because this movie was pretty good. It's not, you're not going to go crazy, but like there are moments when it'll make you think about Batman a little differently sometimes, and that's okay, because sometimes we need a little difference. Sometimes we don't just need a Caped Crusader. We need justice. But this movie will definitely get your dick rock hard. It's a really cool movie. And honestly, it's something different. It's different than what your normal Batman movie is going to be. It's obviously every Batman movie is a little dark, but this one kind of pushes it a little more. So I would advise, if you have a kid going to see it, there's going to be some moments where you're like, oh, this is a little much. You know what I mean? So, expect that going into it. There is no after credits scenes, so make sure you don't stay behind and waste your time, honestly. But yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate everybody who's watching. Even if there's just a few of you, it's all good. I appreciate it. I really like to just kind of talk, so it really helps me out, and it's just kind of good therapy for me, like I always say. So I appreciate it. You can catch me on my streams on twitch.tv /bronze_sausage. You can hit me up on Facebook at Bronze Sausage. I'm all over the place, so hit me up. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.